1992, in some sense, Deng's is a career of so many ups and downs, and in some sense, at least in terms of the international reaction to 1989, and to some degree the domestic one economically, is one of further retrenchment, some very significant outrage internationally. But in some sense, if he has a second large chance in 1978, he has a third chance in 1992 to make his mark on the country. And why is that date so important and still not only remembered today, but emulated by every Chinese leader after him?
In the summer of 1988, Deng felt that before he retired, he ought to allow prices to be decontrolled. And so he took that step. And then inflation took off, and people were extremely unhappy. And then at the end of the year, conservatives got control of the economy. Inflation had been too wild. And so everything was restrained growth, don't have risk. So that one of the reasons there were so many people supporting the students in '89 was not because they knew anything about democracy, but because they were concerned about inflation, and then they were concerned about the very tight money policy. So in 91, 92, they continued the very tight money policy. Of course, foreign sanctions had slowed down the economic growth. And Deng believed that if they didn't begin to grow faster again, there could be real chaos in the country, that there could be a real revolution and people could go wild. And so he tried to encourage them to do that. He went to Shanghai in the summer of '91 and tried to encourage that. But it didn't take. He didn't have a formal position at that time. It was just a retired old man, something I can identify with, a retired old man saying, look, things aren't going right, we got to do something about it. And so he decided he would take a family vacation. If he had announced that he was going south to urge people to speed up reforms, it wouldn't have happened. But he said he's going on a family vacation. Who could object to that? So his family did indeed go on a vacation. They stopped at a few places. And the very first place they stopped at, Wuhan, he said if people don't believe in reform and opening and aren't pushing it, they ought to step down off the stage. And that people knew that meant he was stirring up opposition. Perhaps some of the army would stand by him. But he was smart enough then to head for Guangzhou and Shenzhen, Zhuhai, where he knew people wanted to move ahead, where they wanted to have more market reforms, and where they would be eager to push ahead. So he went down to those places, and when he arrived for this family vacation, reporters had gotten word, and also reporters from Hong Kong got the word. So although you couldn't report his trip inside China, the Hong Kong press and television was reporting it, and it was seeping across the border to all kinds of people. The broadcasts from Hong Kong can seep into all over southern China. So people were getting wise, and there was beginning to be a popular support. And within a week or two, Jiang Zemin, who was the new head, said he thought that Deng was going to have his way, and that he was on trial to see if he was going to bring reform or opening and continue, or whether he was one of those who ought to step down. And he decided to follow Deng's pattern. And within a couple of weeks, people in the South who wanted more reform and wider opening were delighted. Things were beginning to happen. The same kind of wide open policies and the wide open strategy was working again. And so Deng took off. Of course, it led to a little inflation that somebody, Zhu Rongji, had to come in and bring down in the next several years. But they were able to do it in a way this time that was a soft landing. So in a way, his legacy in 1992 was to get the economy back on this growth, rapid growth strategy, and it worked.
Last question, Ezra. China's had many dominant leaders over the course of the 20th century. Yuan Shikai, Chiang Kai-shek, Mao Zedong, Chiang Kai-shek again on Taiwan, Jiang Jingguo. How do you rate Deng Xiaoping?
First of all, I would say a lot of them had in common that they wanted to modernize China. And a lot of the things that Deng wanted to do was something that they shared, and they had a similar vision. But Deng was the only one who really succeeded. He was the one who was able to enrich the Chinese people and to strengthen the nation. Not only did he turn China around, but he helped China rise to where they are influential in the world. And if you say, which leader of the world in the 20th century really changed the course of history? You're a historian, I'm not, but I've lived 50 years of research and I've seen that much of history, that nobody has had the impact on the world that Deng did. Raising several 100 million people above the poverty line, bringing back an ancient civilization to the first time where it was not only a power in the region, but taking part in the world activities and accepting world norms, joining World Trade Organization, taking part in other international organizations, and then being so influential that it's one of the two dominant powers in the world today. It was Deng Xiaoping who did that. And I think in Chinese history, maybe one or two other leaders could rank with that kind of accomplishment. Of course, it wasn't just one person who did this. He had to have a lot of other people who realized that changes were needed and they cooperated and had the ability. It depended on Mao Zedong having had unified the country. If the country weren't unified, he wouldn't be able to do those things. But to take it from a country that was absolute mess, chaos, practically civil war, to putting it on the path to modernization, it was an extraordinary accomplishment. And having the wisdom to manage that political process was unusual. I've been amazed in going through the minutes of the meetings with foreign leaders, how much he knew about the world. This was an extraordinarily well-informed person. He could spontaneously give an hour lecture on Vietnam, political, economic history, or Russia, or the United States, of course China. He had met the leaders of the world. It was extraordinarily well-informed and thoughtful and strategic. He was not a micromanager, but he had the big picture, and he led the great ancient civilization into the modern world.
Ezra Vogel, thank you very, very much indeed.
Welcome.
感谢，感谢。
别谢，别谢。